Good afternoon, everyone. Great. So first of all, I take this opportunity to thank DSCI for having us once again here to share our knowledge and experience. The topic is a very interesting one, which is cyber resiliency for digital enterprise. We have an amazing set of speakers here as well. Let me quickly introduce the speakers and the panelists here. So we have Sanjay Narang, who is a Senior Director of Target, and we have Satish Kumar, Senior Vice President CISO for InMobi Group. We have Lakshmi Narasimhan from Intellect Design Arena Private Limited as well. So just before we start the panel discussion, thought of just sharing some derived experience, what I see personally in my experience, especially when we talk about the digital enterprise, right, and the resilience for digital enterprise. So today, every business is a technology business, right? So in the past, we have seen a lot of businesses using technology to run the business. But today, actually, we are seeing a lot of businesses are getting built around technology, right? And you can see that is happening even with a Pani Puri seller running his entire business on technology to a large multi-conglomerate business as well. So in today's scenario and the future, if you look at, right, a lot of these technologies are coming together, which is actually a full stack cognitive architecture is getting evolved, which will be used for running these digital enterprises, right? So we can see that is helping companies and industries to transform. For example, how Amazon Go is really built on the entire cognitive architecture, right? And completely transforming the way how the retail company is running. Similar way, if you see the Google car, right, or autonomous car, right, that's another example of how these technologies are transforming the industry and the domain itself. And we have also seen that Volvo is launching an autonomous car, which is doing the interview, replacing the HR manager's role, right? So NetDragon is a $10 billion Chinese company who's appointing a humanoid as a CEO, right? So you can see every aspect, every industry, this technology and digital adoption is exponentially increasing, and that is where we would need to seriously look at this resiliency for the enterprise, especially on the digital transformation, right? And you will see that a lot of, in the morning actually, so when I was telling actually, the biggest question we need to ask when these digital transformation happening, a lot of devices are getting autonomous and intelligent, right? So if that is getting smarter than us, right, what is the kind of future? That's what the question we need to ask ourselves. So this is where resilience is coming as an important topic. So devices are getting autonomous today. They are getting intelligent, they are getting connected, they are getting smaller, and they are getting autonomous as well, right? So you will see that a lot of data in the future will be originated, transferred between the devices and stored, analyzed, and decisions are also taken by the devices by itself. So that is where it becomes autonomous, right? Then we have a huge role to play in that one. So this is where I think we would need to be really understanding the risk associated with that when the devices are taking decisions, right? When the devices are becoming smart and autonomous and intelligently taking decisions, how resilient it is and what is the role that we need to play, right? And how organization needs to be prepared for that. So this is where we need to be really understanding what kind of zero-day vulnerabilities are there and what kind of zero-click attacks can happen where we are living in a world where there's a lot of unknown threats and unknown defense requirements as well available there, right? So every connected devices in this world, which is being leveraged in a consumer industry or a government or even in our own household, can be a target for cyber criminals and can be used either against us or their targets, right, for various purposes. And that is where this defense has to be at the edge, right? So, and companies have to really look at cyber resiliency when they are running a lot of digital transformation programs, when they are into their cloud journey. That is where cyber resiliency is very, very important. So we would need to understand from the experts here who are from various industries to see how the cyber resiliency and the digital, business resiliency, how to be coming together, how do we really need to manage going forward, right? So my first question would be to Sanjay from Target is that, Sanjay, actually we see a lot of interchangeable words, right? Like resiliency, BCP, DR, and the new coined words like cyber resiliency, right? How in a layman's perspective, how in a corporate, these things are evolving? How do we differentiate between these two, cyber resiliency and business resiliency from the traditional versus to the new age resiliency we are talking about? I think at the bottom you have a...
this works. So that is resiliency, right?
Yeah.
It works. So yes, I think I'll take that question more in a generic sense. There are words like resiliency, disaster recovery, reliability. So what does it mean? So let's understand it for more generic perspective and then apply it to more of a cyber and a business resiliency. So I'll take a very simple analogy. Let's say you have a 100-watt electric bulb at your home. What does reliability for that bulb mean to you? It just means that whenever you switch it on, it turns on and gives you a brightness of 100 watt. And it keeps giving that for the duration that switch is on. Now that is what is reliability. Basically, ability of a service to perform as expected and do that consistently. Now, what happened? There is a power failure. And if you still want that bulb to be running, you will actually have a mechanism to do a switch over to an alternative source of the power, such as diesel generator or UPS. And that is what is called reliability, which is recovery or disaster recovery, which is basically ability to restore from a failure. Now then, what is resiliency? Resiliency is actually much more than that. Now, you don't only get the disasters as a disruptions, you get a lot of disruptions such as power fluctuations, voltage fluctuations, or it could be the short circuits. So you need to have a mechanisms to handle all those disruptions. You will have some, for example, in this case, stabilizers, you will have MCBs, you will have a right quality of the cable which connects to both of them. Coming to the word of digital enterprise for the technology services, what that means is ability of a service to avoid or mitigate any kind of a disruptive event, right? And ability to quickly respond and, if required, recover from that. That's what is called resiliency. Now, when you need to do resiliency for the digital world, you need to do multiple things. For example, you need to have graceful degradation. Obviously, you need to have disaster recovery possible. You need to have robust incident management, and all of that is required. So to sum it up, I would say most enterprises strive for having reliable services, which is the result. And they achieve that by making their services resilient, which is basically the ability of them to withstand and adapt to any disruptive event, both whether it be cyber or it be a business or any kind of an event. And service should continue to function as expected for the customer. So I generally use one line for that. If reliability is an outcome and the resiliency is the way you achieve that outcome, and disaster recovery or business continuity planning is one of the things that you do to get the resiliency.
Okay, interesting. So with that start, actually, see, one of the industries where the fastest adoption of digital transformation was happening in the financial banking segments, right? So probably Lakshmi, I would like to hear from you that what kind of experience in your view that the adoption of resiliency in a fintech or in a banking and financial segment, how do you see that?
No, fintech world is no different from any other industry that, any industry today is thriving towards success. It is facing the industry competition, challenges, its own thing. When we talk about resiliency here, of course, Narang touched upon it, in terms of adapting to the change is one of the key attributes in terms of how an organization can respond, right? Likewise, challenges may be thrown up. How are we going to respond again? And how are we going to recover? So there are multiple dimensions around change, challenges, recovery, run and recover. These are different dimensions of resilience that's been forced on all organizations, right? In fact, if resiliency has to be taken as a concept or a subject, it is actually an overarching thing. It's not by itself anything. And DR and BCP are subsets part of the resilience capability. That's the first thing. And when we talk about technology as such, and any technology that undergoes a change, right? It has to, we are talking about transformation. This is a word that is a buzzword. Of course, a lot of salespeople use it to give that power and impact and marketing capability. But if, in my personal view is, it will be an irony if we say that an organization is resilient, then it has to be only a change. It's not a transformation, it's only a change. The reason why I call it as that is it all depends on the design and plan that we have thought through. In terms of, if you are talking about a technology change, what is under the hood of the technology? So it's going to be multiple components, whether it is a front-ending, it's a back-end, it's a database, it is a cloud, or it's a framework, it's a programs. So multiple elements, components come together to form a system, right? How capable we are to swiftly adapt to the change, and the change has to be seamless. That is very important from a change perspective. And when we talk about challenges, I think COVID has given enough examples in terms of how challenges are imposed to the society, and every individual, every organization has faced the challenge and they have come out of it. And it is about the ability to respond, and if it is about looking at the opportunities when a challenge is being thrown up to us, and that's where examples of Swiggy, Zomato, all of them, they thrived during the COVID phenomena because they were looking at new opportunities. So they were able to extend their business value-added services. They came out with out-of-box thinking in terms of contactless services. So a lot of things came out as part of the challenging capabilities. And when it comes to recovery, run and recover model, last Friday, last weekend, I watched a Tamil movie. I don't know how many of you are fans of Rajinikanth here. There is a new movie that was released, right? Anybody watched that Jailer movie? If you see that movie, there are enough examples of resilience built across the movie. It could be in terms of how somebody is able to anticipate what is going to come and then strategize how they are going to act for it, and then operationalize it, executes it, and ensure that everything is taken care of. Be it the family or the hero himself, he ensures that all of these are sequenced. So that design model or design pattern, if you are able to apply in any organization, and that becomes a resilient strategy.
Interesting, thank you. When it is coming to the traditional business, right, the BCP, DR and all very, very mostly common used practices or things, right? But when you're talking about digital enterprise, the digital resiliency is something very new, right? So it's going to be very difficult to help the various stakeholders to understand the digital resiliency, right? So Satish, probably next question to you is to see that, how do you see in your experience that how do we really help various stakeholders to understand digital resiliency and cyber resiliency, and what kind of KPIs or metrics or data points that we can really use to help people understand that, okay, there is a need for a cyber resiliency and digital resiliency, and here is where we are, and we need to really move forward. In your experience, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so basically, as I think both of them spoke about, the traditional BCP DR, which was more of business continuity planning, was more around how do we keep those critical operations processes up and running. So I think we used to perform a BI exercise. I'm sure the business impact assessment exercise, we go back to talk to the relevant business owners, stakeholders, ask about their commitments, what they committed back to the different customers. I think that was a very important input. I usually, lighter note, I used to say that many organizations would have implemented some DR technology without doing BCP. You can't recover something which you don't know what is critical for the business. So predominantly we used to call BCP first and then of course DR, because without performing a BIA, you don't get those RTOs, RPOs, which becomes an inputs for the recovery strategy. So while that was the traditional BCP DR, which is predominantly, of course, still many organizations do that to ensure that any disruption, you are still continuing the business because the critical. So I think fundamentally, the difference between that versus digital cyber resiliency is because today, the cyber challenges are very different, especially organizations embracing cloud. Many organizations are exposed on the internet. The different threats like your DDoS attacks or ransomware attacks. In fact, so I think those, especially organizations who are embracing this cloud, multi-cloud kind of organizations, especially if you look at, I come from a digital native, I think the business runs on cloud.
Yeah.
And the business folks understand the importance of, like, for example, I think they understand resilience in the context of the running the business, right? Primarily the business runs on cloud, like as I spoken about Zomato or Swiggy or any of those digital native companies, especially which are on the cloud. So for them, primarily the business runs on cloud, and they understand the importance of disruption. Like for example, I normally take example of a 1 minute downtime for a national stock exchange, right? Forget 1 minute, even 10 seconds, a small
Yep.
blip. I think the amount of loss, right? I think so. Predominantly earlier we used to speak about this loss, the potential, typically the loss based on which the investments is to go into to prepare the overall organization. So I think same context. While I understand it, matrix is a very complex subject. Interestingly, Maitre, I think most of you know the Maitre attack framework. What we talk. There's a cyber resiliency engineering framework which Maitre came in, which they spoke about certain dimensions. Like, of course, first, do you anticipate? I think as he's spoken about, what is the anticipation? When is the next DDoS attack? Or when is the next ransomware attack? I think that's typically what we call as part of preparation. So if your organization is prepared, I think that's where the resiliency journey starts.
Yeah.
So first is anticipate. Now, I know we CISOs, we keep saying, right, there's nothing 100%, right? So in spite of the best organizations prepared themselves, but there is something which will happen. So in that context, once you, okay, how do you improve my detection capability during anticipation? Those metrics you can publish.
Yeah.
So am I really able to detect? I think typically, once that is, I think once you've grown to that next level, probably second is withstand. Now withstand is, of course, you've gone through an incident, because typically you can't stop attack, you can't stop a breach.
Yeah.
Like even a large IT company had a ransomware attack, right? It's not that. So the point is now, how much can you withstand? And how soon will you come back is what is all about resiliency.
Yeah.
So one is anticipate, you can draw metrics, of course, and then withstand. How, usually I normally say the attack, how much can you delay the attack? I think that predominantly the dwell time, if you can reduce the dwell time, so anticipate, withstand, of course, then is recover. The last quadrant or dimension is adapt, because you have to adapt from the cyber attack and be prepared for the next attack. It is not that this is the only attack we will be seeing. I think overall in these 4 dimensions, organization starts building these metrics and start push. See, traditionally cyber metrics, risk metrics, we have been publishing these metrics all the way to the board. But today boards realize that it's not very far. Either if the organization did not have a breach, or if they had a breach, when is the next breach? All that anticipation, how much can we withstand, how much can we recover, and what is the adaptation? I think metrics are very important, and I think many organizations are driving towards that journey.
Interesting.
I'm sorry to make it long.
No. It's a very interesting perspective, Satish. Very interesting. Thank you. Related to one question, actually. So when it is coming to digital transformation, right? For certain companies, they are really, literally born digital, right? And really cloud-native companies, right? So, but there are a lot of other organizations, a huge chunk out there, who are in their journey to cloud, right? So there are 2 different paradigm altogether. So probably next question to Sanjay, right? So what are the best practices for an organization, especially when they are getting into their cloud transformation journey to cloud? What kind of key consideration that they should be adopting to improve their cyber resilience and digital resilience?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to cloud, a lot of emphasis also need to be given to the technology resilience in addition to cyber resilience. And foundation for any resilience, as both Narasimha and Mr. Satish said, they're saying anticipation. So what I'm saying is, while that is well known in a cyber space, but in technology space, our engineers have not been doing that very well. So I think that foundation starts for assume there will be failures. Things will fail, there will be disruptions. Now, if you start from that assumption, then you will be able to move on to, okay, what is it that I can do, what best practices I can follow. So there are a lot of things which we need to do, but I will, take top few. The number one is have your availability and recovery targets, right? There is nothing like 100% availability. Every 9 that you add to the availability comes up with a huge cost. And even with 5 nines of availability, there is about 5 minutes of downtime in a year and 20 seconds of downtime in this thing, right? So having those targets is very important. And once you are having those targets, the next step is have a mechanism to detect the disruptions automatically. It shouldn't happen that a user or someone calls you to say there is an issue at your end, right? you should have the right observability to detect it automatically. And once you are able to detect, then it comes to basically the things that Mr. Satish said, hey, we need to respond to that, we need to adapt to that, we need to recover from that. So there are multiple things that we need to do in terms of best practices. For example, we need to have a disaster recovery. Again, that would be depending on the business requirements, whether you need it or not, whether you need it a cold one or a warm one or a hot one is something important. Then, can you have a graceful degradation? For example, if you are, we're talking about the withstanding, if you are having an attack at this point, we cannot have a full featured service available, but can you have a limited set of core features which are very important available to the users? For example, if you cannot allow the transactions, can you at least be available as a read-only to that, right? Then there are, from a technical perspective, there are patterns like a circuit breaker or the retries. Can you kind of use that? And do you have the robust incident management process, which becomes very important during the incidents and the disruptions? Now, so that is number 3. Number 4 is all these measures that we put, it's very important to test. I've seen the organizations, they will be backing up data regularly. They said we have like point in time restore for every hour or every 15 minutes. But when it comes to the time of restoring the data from a backup, the backup is corrupted. You actually lost. So it's very important for this. So if I sum it up, I think design for failures by assuming there will be failures, then detect automatically, have mechanisms to recover and respond if possible automatically, and then test of all these things.
Thank you. So since we're talking about cloud, right? Every business is now slowly adopting cloud or transforming to cloud, right? And we were talking about the example, I was just talking about the example of a Pani Puri seller, right? Yesterday also I used the same example in the last panel. So he gets the order through an e-commerce, food ordering app. The payment is happening through a fintech app. The supply of the food or delivery of the food is happening through a digital logistics platform, right? Even for a Pani Puri seller, if you see different platforms, different vendors, different technologies coming together, right? Then you can imagine a large company, even for Target, right? It's a big company, or, you can see how many technologies have to come together, and many at managed by different vendors, hosted in different data centers, with different scalability, different issues. And this is where for an organization today, an organization cannot compete with another independently, right? So an organization has to build an ecosystem to be relevant in the market and compete with another, an ecosystem by itself, right? So in this whole thing, if you look at, supply chain is very, very important, right? So all your partners are going to be forming your ecosystem, will be the part of that integrated supply chain. From a business resiliency, and especially this whole ecosystem is moving towards digital, either born digital or running on digital. Digital resiliency is extremely important for the supply chain ecosystem as well, right? So that is where third-party risk management is very, very important. So that is where I would like to hear from Satish. So in your perspective, how do we enable, or what kind of key consideration when we look at the digital and cyber resiliency for the supply chain ecosystem for an organization?
So I think, typically manufacturing organizations have already done that because if we look at large automobile industries, they all, because they run in an ecosystem, the component suppliers, if one component doesn't get supplied to Bajaj Auto on time, I think, today, all the automobiles follow this just in time. They don't have any inventory. I usually take these examples during my sessions and all, like the whole motorcycle is ready and the headlamp is not ready because the headlamp is yet to come from Lumax. Yeah. I think that's broken. The supply chain is broken. So I think in that context today, thanks to we have all these sophisticated ERP systems where the platforms are extended back to the component suppliers. They predict, they know that what kind of supply. But yeah, definitely it's a risk. The whole supply chain risk we saw. In fact, we saw many years back, hard disks were not available. In fact, I think Thailand or somewhere, the hard disks were not available, and most of the laptop companies, right, could not ship laptop because without a disk they can't. I think fundamentally supply chain, again, in the COVID times also we saw, right, a lot of spare parts not coming from China and all that. So I think supply chain has been one of the biggest thing, and many. I think every large enterprise runs on this whole supply chain ecosystem. While it's a risk, but of course, as you mentioned, third-party risk management, the suppliers itself can be a risk also. Like, of course, we saw SolarWinds and other supply chain attacks where, of course, US came out with this whole concept of having a S-bomb kind of thing. I think, so it's both. While you can't live with suppliers, partners, because they are vendors or partners in the whole growth system, but looking at the risk, I think third-party risk management has been there for ages, and every other large enterprise has a lot of more stress on how do we improve their overall third-party risk management as a process, governance, vendor governance. I think that's absolutely important, and it's becoming more critical because we are living in a world where it's an ecosystem, and every partner is part of the overall success story, and every partner itself can be a risk also, if at all, in the overall ecosystem, if something fails.
Absolutely. So when it is coming to TPRM, there is something called third-party cyber risk management. So third-party risk management is one aspect. Third-party cyber risk management is another aspect. If you look at the NotPetya attack, right, it originated, believed to be or said to be originated from Russia, targeted Ukraine, and unfortunately, right, that people lost the control of that, where that not so ransomware kind of malware, which traveled around the world, hit many global companies, including Saint-Gobain and chocolate manufacturing companies. And through the shipping company, it landed in Los Angeles port. And eventually, it came back and hit Russia itself by impacting the Rosneft gas company within Russia, right? So supply chain cyber risk management is very, very important, because even a software which you're using, right, through the third party can be used or, impersonated to really launch attack. That is one thing. Supply chain poisoning is another aspect when we look at supply chain cyber resiliency, because there were news actually in leading Western newspapers saying that some of the leading laptop manufacturing companies which are getting manufactured in China is having a chip embedded it, which is used for spying or espionage, right? So nobody knows, right? So that is illegally done. And there are law enforcement agencies already implanting, chips to track anything and everything in whatever, including every keystroke. So there is supply chain poisoning. So this is where cyber resiliency for supply chain and third-party cyber risk management is also very, very important. And we need to look at how the governments are really coming up to control and put more resilience into these kind of risks and threats. But from a banking and fintech point of view, Lakshmi, what kind of initiatives from the government that you see to improve cyber resilience, especially from a financial industry perspective? What do you see there? What kind of initiatives?
See, the government intervention on the banking and financial industry is there for quite some time, right? So RBI regulation exists for many years now. And that's what we heard today morning, that even in insurance sector, this is now becoming a mandate. So the regulatory influence on the banking sector has always been there. More than the regulatory influence, I would say from a resiliency perspective, it is the market demand which continuously forces any organization to adapt to the change and make itself more resilient. So that is something. So we were calling out some examples of automobile and other things. I'll come back to the financial industry. I just wanted to call out something. So from an automobile industry standpoint, earlier days, the tire manufacturers, the way the stepney is being provided along with the vehicle. So that is more of a BCP for us. And now with the tubeless tires and advanced tires, which can run on and on and on, right? So that is the resilient capability that industry has adopted, looking at what we have undergone, right? Yeah. All along. So likewise, everything. And there cannot be anything beyond a human body which is resilient, right? So we are the magic wand in terms of making ourselves resilient. And any organization is made up of same people, process, and technology. We will leave out the process part of it for now. But now that Sarang also said that any organization, we should assume that there will be failures, right? Yeah. And it is people who are actually forming the organization. Yeah. So if innate ability is there within us to be resilient, then automatically it gets reflected in the practice that we follow. Yeah. And in a fintech industry, what's happening of late is whatever was offered as a niche service, now, there was one point in time, they converted those services into products. And now the industry is going through an era where every products are getting consolidated and they are made into platforms, right? And now these platforms will go and sit on a cloud. and then it will be offered as a SaaS service. And even banks will offer a SaaS as a service or a banking as a service. So that is the roadmap that we are seeing in terms of the technology adoption, technology change, and what comes along with it is the innate resilience design architecture. So we are talking about component level redundancies, and then we talk about high availability, and then we talk about multiple zones, then we talk about multiple region hosting. So at different levels, different layers, we are already talking about this in terms of how a system will thrive even if there is an interruption. And just like a shock absorber in any vehicle, right? So we anticipate that there is going to be a crack in the road. We anticipate that the journey is not going to be always smooth. So like the design of a shock absorber, the mechanisms are being put in place even in a banking industry to ensure that they are able to withstand reasonable amount of impact. So that is already in place. Banking industry is relatively mature, I would say, compared to other industry. So that reasonable assurance in terms of the best practices, cybersecurity best practices, data privacy best practices, business continuity best practices, resiliency best practices, all of those are already adopted. It's already in place. So now it is about what is going to be the next new change. And when it comes to the next new change, how do we encompass, how do we embrace and bring together, as you rightly said, the third parties and others who are all part of the ecosystem, how do we bring everybody together to make sure that there are no gaps in the entire ecosystem? So awareness could be one, but there are other gaps, possible gaps, which may arise because of cost imbalance. So a corporate company can afford to go with a high-end model of a security device, whereas a vendor who is supporting the corporates may not be investing too much of money on the security products.
Yeah.
So there is a relatively disproportionate allocation of security funds or focus. They may be intending to ensure right security is provided to the customer. However, they may not be willing to spend that extra money. So now with SASE and other things coming into the picture, where this centralization will kind of help the ecosystem, so everybody can access the centralized system repository.
Yeah.
So thereby they don't have to invest anything independently. Like he said, the ERP system may get extended to them. So that extends the risk for the organization. While it brings convenience, real-time visibility in terms of inventory and so on and so forth, there is innate risk in that.
Yeah.
So that can be handled by a decentralized strategy where the organization can take some centralized control mechanism. So that could be a possibility I'm seeing. And resiliency is very much into everything that is being done today. Just that it's not been called out the way it has to be because it's not a topic of conversation.
Thank you. I think that leads to the next very interesting topic when it is coming to personal, right? The digital boundary of an organization has gone beyond their own organization and their supply chain ecosystem, and it has even come to our own home, because today the hybrid working model, right, or work from home strategy, our home network is also part of the corporate system today, and for knowingly or unknowingly, right, it is also getting embedded and integrated to that. And this is where I personally see that for me, yesterday also I used the same notion. It's all become personal nowadays, right? Whether it is business or technology or cloud, or it's also become personal today. And our home Wi-Fi we are using for delivering an official work, right, through that, right? So, so it is getting embedded and attached. And this is where we need to really understand, we need to extend that digital and cyber resilience to even to our personal networks, devices, and connections as well. Because today we are living in, as I mentioned, every business is a technology business. Today we are living in a world where without technology, we at a personal level cannot do anything, right? So we are living in a world where we are going to start e-technology, right? FDA has already approved a digital pill where we'll be eating technology, right? Or we are going to eat AI. And there is already bio sensors which is already developed, biochips are already developed, which will be implanted into our bodies. And you already know that intelligent pacemakers, cochlear implants, and this insulin, smart insulin pumps are already in place, which is again digital, which is again connected, is again manufactured by this large multi-billion conglomerates, which is going to be inside our body as well, right? So we are going to have this technology inside our body. We are going to eat and drink this technology and AI, right? So that means what? We need to really extend this resilience into even our own personal lives and, while we're eating and sleeping as well, right? So the unfortunate part here is actually, for a cyber criminal, doesn't matter, right? Any of these things can be used for his various purposes, right? So the motives of the cyber criminals are changing. Earlier, people used to really, their motive was to make a lot of money, right? So they steal data breaches will be happening, they're stealing the data and selling it in the dark web for making money, right? That was one of the biggest motive. Then the motive started changing. So some people are now launching attacks to disrupt the businesses, to disrupt the operation, right? Now, we are seeing a lot of attacks across the globe, including national critical infrastructure is getting attacked to completely destroy the whole thing. So data breaches to disruption to destruction, right? That is where the motives are getting changed. In this whole thing, you'll see a lot of different types of TTPs, techniques, tactics, and procedures are being used to really launch these attacks, right? And I personally came across a number of incidents or examples of attacks where in the large-scale attacks, whether it's for a large corporate or against a government, where some of these connected devices which are inside our own home is being used as a lethal weapon by the cyber criminals. So, in my personal opinion, I see just like every business is a technology business, I personally see that every crime in the future is going to be a cyber crime or a cyber-led crime, right? This is where cyber resiliency and digital resiliency are going to be very, very important even at a personal level. So we all have an equal responsibility to really ensure that we are extending the resiliency at every last mile, right? So I always say that, cyber defense at the edge, right? It's not just about the IoT devices. It's not about just the smart gadget. It's everywhere, including a smart TV that we are talking about, including a smart vacuum cleaner, right? Or including the smart watch you're wearing, right? So, because it's all are going to be connected. By 2025, IDC's report, it says there are 50 billion connected devices. What does that mean? There are 50 billion entry points for cyber criminals to get into any of these networks. Right? Just like the way I was talking about the NotPetya, I have hundreds. I can stand here and talk for the next 3 days non-stop with examples of similar attacks, where we have seen, one of the examples, right? Even a smart car is launched, even before the smart car is launched, the key, the PKE, so the passive keyless entry system, the PKE device, which is used to really open that car, is available in the dark web for sale, even before the car is getting sold in the market, right? So you can see that resiliency has to be adopted at every level, right? So even in Florida, there was actually this fish tank, smart fish tank was hacked to launch an attack against the casino, right? Because the fish tank had a sensor which is there to control the temperature and lighting for the fish tank. Cyber criminals initially tried to directly launch an attack against the casino, which they were failing. And eventually they found out a weakness inside the fish tank, which is connected to the casino's network. And through that sensor, they got inside, right? So these are the kind of attacks. And today, with the adoption of analytics and AI at a very extensive space, cyber criminals are using analytics AI to a great extent to launch attacks, right? And to build weapons and to breach organizations, right? As based on their objectives. So deepfake is one of the tools which cyber criminals are using a big time. So as far as my personal, suggestions is concerned, yesterday I was presenting 7 commandments to improve the cyber resilience and product security engineering capabilities. I heard a lot of requests, and many people were coming and asking me if I can just share in today's session because they were not able to note down everything. So I have actually, out of my personal experience, derived about 7 top commandments at my personal recommendation to see if we can improve cyber resilience. I'll just probably share here as well. And then probably I'll take some inputs and questions from the audience, if that helps actually. So, yeah, we have about 5 minutes. Yeah, so as far as my experience is concerned, the majority of the attacks, right, in my personal experience, that I've seen, whether it's a big attack or small attacks, is not just because of there are not there are not tools available, there are not policies available, there are not frameworks available. It's not because there are not people available. All these things were there, but still breaches happened. The fundamental thing what I have seen is actually the breach is happening just because some basics are missing. Some foundational aspects are missing, right? So one of the things that we need to do to improve digital resiliency and cyber resiliency is not only investing in huge tools and technologies and frameworks, but also to ensure that we have the right basics and fundamentals are met. The second one is actually secure by design and defense in-depth programs. So secure by design is always mostly correlating to the application security aspect, but secure by design can be embedded at every aspect of your product, services, and your lifecycle management. The third one is actually foundational security operations is available in most of the organization. Now, just like the way how cyber criminals are using analytics and AI to build, autonomous weapons or, vulnerability discovery platforms or even adaptive malwares, we need to embed analytics and AI into our own systems that is where we need to have cognitive security operations. So transform your reactive response to proactive defense by moving your foundational security operations to cognitive security operations. The fourth one is actually many a time what I found is actually in spite of having all these tools, technologies and people and skill, security was always running in silos even within security. Your identity access management is running separately, application security team is running separately, infra security is managed separately. There is no collaboration, there is no correlation, right? So this is where integrated security operations, the consolidation of security tools, technologies, and processes is extremely important. The sixth one is actually risk-based resilience. So that is very, very important. So most of the time I've seen a lot of compliance-based, checkbox-based, resiliency improvement, but risk profile-based resiliency improvement is very, very important. Sixth one, zero trust. Zero trust as a concept, zero trust as a mindset we need to really adopt. This is where it has to be built as a culture. A security-first culture has to be built right from the board to the security guard at the gate and even to your extended ecosystem, right? The seventh one, cyber resilient supply chain, right? The most important. So these are the 7 fundamental things which I would strongly recommend to organization to improve cyber resilience and digital resilience for an organization. We had a lot of very interesting comments from our esteemed panel members. So we have about another 2.5-3 minutes to go. If there is any question from the audience, happy to take it. Okay, so if there is no questions, I think thank you for the wonderful time, really interacting here. Thank you, DSAI, for extending the opportunity. Looking forward to support again in the future. Thank you. Jai Hind. Yeah.
Thank you.